All right, everybody. Well, welcome back. We are moving along through our career fair and super excited about our next speaker. And we're going to give her as much time as possible. Amanda Lorenz, an attorney. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm always excited to chat about being an attorney. As it's something that I think I've always wanted to do from the start. So yeah, just go ahead and get started if that's okay.
Go for it.
Great. So I did prepare a little PowerPoint. Um, I whoops. Mm. We'll start. All right. Are you able to see my screen?
We cannot yet.
I can't.
All right. Let me see. Okay.
Is it not allowing you to share?
Yeah. Let me see. Well, let me try it again.
There we go.
Perfect.
Wonderful.
There we go. All right. So thank you again for having me here to chat about the career of attorney. So I wanted to first let you know that this is something that's near and dear to my heart because it has consumed my life since, as we'll talk about in a few minutes, from a very young age. Being an attorney is something that I always knew that I wanted to do, and it was from a not always. I mean, at one point I thought about dentist or whatnot, but I after I was routinely called bossy or stubborn, and I would quickly come back with, I'm not bossy or stubborn, I'm just explaining why I'm right. And realize that it was always in my passion to try to convince others to agree with me, or to understand my point of view, or why I wanted them to do something that I was trying to do. I quickly learned that being an attorney probably was in my blood and something that was a good career choice for me. But I really think the turning point came in eighth grade, where when I was sitting in a classroom, and at that time, if you wanted to use the restroom and leave the classroom, you had to have a pass in order to be a hall pass in order to walk in the hall. And the teacher had allowed the first two students to use the pass without issue. But when the third student asked, and this student was quite a troublemaker, but hadn't been making trouble that day for whatever reason. But when the third student asked, the teacher immediately said no. And the student said, well, why? And the teacher said, because. And without even realizing what I was doing, and I wasn't really even friends with the student, I stood up and I said, that's not fair. That's not fair because you let the other two students use the hall pass without issue. But when this student asked, you wouldn't allow him to do so. And the answer of just because isn't enough. And so after a few minutes of debate back and forth with the teacher, that student was actually allowed to use the hall pass and go to the bathroom. And I was then noted from then on as the class attorney. So when anyone had any issues or wanted something to be advocated or discussed, they would come to me and I would decide whether or not it was worthwhile, and they had a strong enough case for me to bring it up to the teacher. So I think technically that might be where my legal career started, but that will always stick out in my mind as one of the turning points where I realized, hey, maybe I'm not half bad at pleading my case. But that is something I'm a person who likes rules, and I like things to be fair. And the career of attorney has allowed me to really stick up for those that may need a little bit of help sometimes, or just to explain, hey, how the law works and what things you may be entitled to. So a little bit about me. I am now almost for the last 22 years now, I've been a practicing attorney. I've worked at a small law firm, I've worked at a medium law firm, I've worked at a large law firm, and now I'm working at a company as in-house counsel. Now, to give you an idea of what in-house counsel is, these big companies like Sony or Google or Amazon, huge companies with a lot of employees, well, they also have legal departments within that company that help to answer some of the legal questions or issues that come their way. So I am one of those attorneys that works inside a company now that's been for about the last 7 years. That's how my career has shifted. And we'll talk a little bit more about exactly what I do on a day-to-day basis in a few minutes. So just a little bit of where we're going. We'll start out with just chatting about what is an attorney, what do they do, education and training to become an attorney, and what requirements there are, different types of attorneys. We'll talk about the criminal attorney, the civil attorney, what type of attorney am I? Hint, it's not criminal. And other careers you may have in the area of law. So attorneys aren't the only career in the legal field. There are some other types of jobs that you could certainly have if you want to be in the legal field, but maybe not have that calling to be an attorney. And we'll close by just chatting about a few suggestions if you are interested, how you can even start now. It's never too early to start in looking into or just familiarizing yourself with the legal field and what may interest you within that field. So first off, what is an attorney? So an attorney is someone who is educated in the law. So you have to go to law school, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in our training and requirements section, but you do need to be educated in the law. The legal field is very specialized. You usually do not find attorneys who know everything about every subject. So if there's an area that might be a specific interest to you, then that may be an area that you want to learn more about in that law. So in law school, you do learn kind of a little bit about everything, but typically most attorneys will specialize in specific areas so they can really become experts in that area. You need to be licensed to practice law as an attorney. So each state has what's called a bar exam. And when you study and pass that bar exam, you then have a license to practice in that state. So I am licensed in California, Arizona, and Nevada, although that currently is inactive because I really haven't used it. But I have taken bar exams in all 3 of those states in order to practice law in those states. So once you're licensed, you can give advice to others about the law and their legal issues. And you can also represent them in court, build defenses for them, and really make sure that you are defending and upholding all of their rights in both civil and criminal cases. So you can be their advocate. You can really make sure that you're standing up for that person and doing what's in the best interests of your client. So education and training. I will note that is actually a picture of my law school where I went. I did go to Penn State Dickinson School of Law. And so I thought, well, it'd be kind of interesting since I knew our law building was only a one building institution to include that picture here. So that's a little personal piece about me. So education and training, it does require a high school degree. And then a college bachelor's degree. So you could do a bachelor's of arts or bachelor's of science, either. And some attorneys actually require a bachelor's of science, depending on which area you're going to go into. And then after you graduate from college, you are required to go to law school. Law school is 3 years typically. Now you can do different types of programs, such as night school. I know my dad went to law school at night as a second career, and that took him about 4 years to finish. So there are different ways to do it, and there are different setups. There's always these days with the different types of online studying and classes, that there seems to be a decent fit for most lifestyles and in most ways. There is one, I think Washington State may not require a bar exam now, but it has a lot of different requirements that you may have to do, or they're trying to put that into effect, where you have to have so much apprenticeship with certain attorneys. So overall, a lot of states are trying to move away a little bit from the bar exam. I can tell you they're not really fun to study for and to take. It's an enormous test that takes a lot of time to study, but it is required in almost every state in order to practice law. Some states will accept another state's bar exam, but California, no state will accept California's bar exam. So if you take California's bar exam, you can practice in California. No other state is going to say, hey, come on over here, we'll waive you in. It just unfortunately won't happen. And then internships and clerkships. Now, those are not mandatory, but they can certainly help to show you what area of law you might want to practice. So, for instance, when I was in law school, I clerked at a specific firm for plaintiffs' attorneys. So most of those cases dealt with auto accidents or someone getting injured. And I was representing the person who was injured, who was suing the person who they thought harmed them. I decided after that first year, I wanted to go and represent the person who was being sued. So the other side, the defendant. And from there, I realized I really preferred working for the defendant. A lot of people prefer working for the plaintiff. But had I not had a clerkship that allowed me the opportunity to do both, I may never have known both sides of things. So I always encourage, whether it's in school or even beforehand, internships or clerkships, because you're not really committing to anything long term. Maybe you think you like family law, you want to do a family law clerkship, and you soon realize family law is maybe not for me. So those are the opportunities that allow you to kind of get in and get your feet wet and see what may or may not interest you. So types of attorneys. First, I said there's criminal and there's civil. So a criminal attorney, so let's just briefly touch on what criminal law is. So it's the system of law that's concerned with the punishment of those who break the law. So if someone commits a crime, the criminal law, criminal justice system determines what is the best punishment for that crime. If someone's being accused of a crime, they're going to need an attorney to defend them. That attorney would help that client understand the criminal law, develop the best defense for that client, let them know what their options may be. Is there the option to potentially do a plea deal or something along those lines, to plea it to a lesser degree? They would gather evidence, file motions, appear in court on behalf of that defendant, interview clients and witnesses, and really get the case together. On the other hand, you also have criminal attorneys who work on behalf of the city or the state, or even the federal government, who are bringing these actions against criminals. They are the prosecutors, the district attorneys. They are bringing these actions to say, hey, bad guy or girl, you did something wrong, and we want to punish you for it. So attorneys work on both sides of the criminal system, but it is always to determine what is the appropriate punishment for the crime, if any, and did this person commit the crime? Were they guilty? So kind of on the other side of things is civil law. So civil law is basically everything except criminal. So civil law has developed, it's basically a body of rules that defines and protects a private citizen's right. So, and then it offers a remedy to make that better. So for instance, if there's a land dispute, two people may believe that they both share ownership of a piece of land. Then the civil law, or that civil structure will determine who owns that land or who's entitled to that land, and are they owed any compensation, or is the other person owed any compensation. Your regular routine car accidents, those are typically civil. A civil law would govern that, because in civil law, it's basically, oops, my mistake, I accidentally turned in front of you, now we got into a car accident, and we have to figure out how we can make this better. You dented my car, so that cost $500. Money is typically the remedy in civil law. It's usually money, or what they call an injunction, and that means stop doing something. So if it's in terms of that land dispute example that I was giving, if a court may say, okay, well, you have to pay them X amount and you have to stop living on the land. So that may be an injunction to stop a party from doing something. So because the area of civil law is so broad, there are many different types of attorneys in the civil law context. So you have your corporate attorneys, so you have corporations all over the world. So those all have to be formed. Sometimes they merge, sometimes they dissolve. You have attorneys that are working on those types of transactions. Insurance. I would venture to say almost all of you are touched by insurance in some way every day, whether it's a car, a house, an apartment, something. Some people have insurance on their iPhones in case they break. There is insurance in any way. So insurance, if something goes wrong and you want to know whether or not that insurance policy covers it, sometimes those matters make it to court. Back to our car accident example, if I get into an accident with my neighbor and you have to see, okay, whose fault was it and whose insurance would pay, you're going to have an attorney that specializes in that and can tell you what type of rights either person may have. Family laws attorneys that deal with divorce or child custody, or specialize in wills and trusts. So if someone passes away or leaves some assets to someone, you have a very specialized attorney that deals with that. It's employment law. If someone, an angry employee is suing their company, or for whatever reason, you would need attorneys that specialize in what employment law may be and how you would remedy that situation. So real estate. You have real estate, just whether buying or selling a house, or how to develop certain pieces of property, you would have attorneys that specialize in that. So one area that's a little bit different is intellectual property. Remember when I was talking about various college degrees that help in certain areas, and a bachelor's in science actually is usually preferred in intellectual property. So intellectual property is patents and trademarks and copyrights. So if you have an invention and you have patented that invention, and then someone comes along and tries to steal your invention and take credit for it, you're going to want an attorney to come in and help represent you and say, hey, no, I have this patent. That's mine. You need to either pay me royalties or stop doing what you're doing. But that usually requires a very, very hefty science background. Environmental, a lot of pollution cases, tax. There's tax issues every day in almost every aspect of business, and that really takes someone who can specifically look into those issues and work with them. So commercial is more when businesses are fighting businesses. So let's say there's a school who has a contract with a bus company, and that bus isn't providing the services that they promised to do. Maybe then there would be some litigation in between the school and that bus company to say, hey, we need to hold you to this contract as to promise that you will pick up the kids in the way that you promised to do here or provide the services. And then sports and entertainment. I promise you, almost every high value athlete or celebrity has their own attorney to help manage that. If they're going to get a sponsorship deal or something that is going to provide any benefit to them, you're going to want an attorney to look over that contract and to help negotiate that. And this is only an example of some of the civil attorneys. There are other types out there, even more specialized. But this is a good example of what you'll see in the civil context. So what type of attorney am I? I already told you, not criminal. I am civil. So when I first started my practice or practicing in 2002, I was working for a law firm. And from 2002 to 2017, I worked with different size law firms, but I was in litigation. So I was in the courtroom. I was defending companies that were fighting each other. On contracts, not physically fighting, I should say, but we're disputing over money. That would be criminal. If they're physically fighting, that would be criminal. This was solely civil. So if usually there was a contract and someone wanted more money, or they wanted out of the contract because they got a better deal, so they would hire me at my firm to help them. Or also insurance companies would hire me at my firm saying, we have someone who was in an accident, or we have this big issue that happened. Here's the insurance policy. Does this cover this situation? And so I would have to read the insurance policy, gather all the facts, and say, yes, you need to pay them, or no, there is no coverage under this policy. And then in 2017, I decided that I wanted a little bit of a career shift, and I went into in-house or corporate counsel. And I currently work for a company who does primarily travel insurance. And what I've done is I have an insurance background, so I can certainly help with our insurance products and letting know, hey, yes, this is something that follows U.S. regulation, and that we can put out a product of this type, or no, it isn't. I manage our litigation. So I'm in a corporation now, so I don't go into the courtroom, but I hire attorneys at firms to go into the courtroom for us. And I manage them because I used to do that. So I know what they should be doing, or maybe what they shouldn't be doing. So I have insight into how that works. I do things with HR. So if we have a personnel issue, I may opine on whether or not that person needs to be terminated, or if we're presenting a severance agreement to someone, I may look over that type of contract and make sure that it's okay to be presented. So my typical day, a lot of meetings, in person, telephone, video conference. I do work in a hybrid setting. So I am in the office some days and I am home some days. So I am a lot of firms and kind of corporate entities have gone to a hybrid setting. So sometimes I'm in person, sometimes I'll travel. I have a team in Florida, so I will go and travel and oversee them and work with them. Or I may just have an in-person meeting with them on a regular basis, and just to keep tabs and make sure that we are all communicating well. I review a lot of documents. I read a lot. Attorneys typically do read a lot, so it's something that you need to be comfortable with. I was never one of those bookworms growing up. I wasn't one who always loved to read. There are some people that absolutely love to. That wasn't me. I don't mind it for my job, but if you absolutely hate reading and reviewing things, then maybe this may not be the best choice, but it did grow on me. So reviewing documents, I'm a very detail-oriented person, so that really helps in this job. So I will review, I do research, and make sure that I'm comfortable with the laws and regulations that may apply to whatever document I'm reviewing, to be sure that we're in compliance, or that this contract says what my commercial team has told me this contract needs to say. I do employee agreements, so if we hire someone, they have an agreement with the company, I help to negotiate those. And something I think that's a little more interesting that I do is anything public facing. So any of our social media posts, press releases, web content, before that goes live, I or one of the other attorneys, we have to review that and make sure it's okay. We have to make sure that it's not that it's not using someone else's trademark. We have to make sure that it's not misrepresenting one of our products, and we have to make sure that it's something appropriate to release to the public that's not going to get us into trouble down the road, whether it be with regulators, because we do work with insurance and have regulators that watching our business, or just the general public. We are all aware of situations where the public may not like something, especially on social media, and next thing you know, it goes viral. We don't want that for our business. So we really try to look and make sure that doesn't happen. I do a lot of negotiating contracts, and then, just overall kind of management of my team. So some other careers in the law, if being an attorney may not be something that you're excited about, there are other ways to support attorneys. So I have a phenomenal paralegal I work with, and she helps really keep me in line. And if I have litigation, she helps me to prepare for that. Same with any litigation support specialists. A lot of these people need to be in the courtroom helping. So if you're in trial or you're preparing for trial, they can really help do that. Legal secretary, that is someone who I couldn't live without, because they help me manage deadlines and priorities and really keep things in order. And they have to have some knowledge of the law and the law field to know, how they're helping to file documents and how they're helping to move things forward. A lot of legal librarians are attorneys, actually, so they're aware of what they need to be. If we go in and an attorney asks, hey, can you help me, find this or research this, they can really help do that. A lot of it is online now, but a lot of law schools and some larger law firms do still have legal libraries. A judge, if you want to be the one, making the rulings as to, what the law states, and being able to do that, it's a very prestigious position. Police officers, actually, in terms of a criminal context, they're the ones enforcing the laws. So that is a career in law. A lobbyist, if you like to, whether it's a certain legislation or a certain initiative that you want to help and stand behind, then a lobbyist is someone who you can certainly try and use to persuade and convince people. And then there's always a teacher and professor that are needed, within the legal field to help continue to pass on knowledge. All right, how can you start now? This is something that interests you. How can you start today? Well, I would encourage, no matter what type of job opportunity you may be looking towards, always strive to get a well-rounded education. That really helps, because then you wouldn't be you have a little bit more to choose from. You won't have blinders on and just thinking about one specific area. Try at this point in time in your life, this is the time to get as much information from different areas as possible to help make that decision as to what you might like. And most of all, what are you good at? Because whatever your job may be, whether you like it or not, you're going to be doing it for a lot of time. You're going to be spending a lot of time on it. So really make sure it's something that you truly like and have a passion towards, so you can make sure that you're doing your best and that it's something that you want to do, that you're spending so much time on. If you are going towards law, something that really helps is, strong research and persuasive writing skills. You do a lot of writing in the legal field, so you want to start sharpening those skills of making that writing persuasive. You have a lot of persuasive writing classes through law school, but it's never too early to start. Practice public speaking. I think this is actually important in most areas that you're going to go into, not just law. Public speaking is not just for attorneys that are going to be stepping into the courtroom. It's sharpen your everyday communication skills. That is never going to be something that you're going to regret. No matter what you do, if you're someone who can effectively and clearly communicate with someone, you're going to do very well at your job. Look for summer camps or experiences that might give you a glimpse into what you might want to do. So there may be mock trials or conferences or different classes. I encourage you to jump in, even if you decide that really wasn't for me. At least you tried and it gave you a little bit of knowledge. Look for jobs in the legal field. I know that our law firms would very, very often hire high school students for file clerks or interns. It would give them a sneak peek into life at a law firm and also give them some connections. So those students have later come around and said, hey, I am applying a law school. Can we meet and chat? Or I'm now applying for my first legal job. Can we chat about that and get some advice? And I was always open to doing that. And then, lastly, no matter what, you may think about, in terms of a career, start collecting information on potential schools, understand their admission requirements, and really look to see how you can start preparing and set yourself up for that. It's never too early to start and just to get an idea. And you can always continue to change your mind and go to where you might think will serve you best in a career. So I think that's about it. And if there are any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them.
I love it. Thank you so much, Amanda. And I love your last slide. That's exactly what we're talking to our student community about is, do your research, look for those internship opportunities, educate. So it was so great for them to hear from you and several of our other speakers. So we don't have any questions in the chat, but I'll get the ball rolling with a question I have. What was something that was like a surprise for you in your field? So obviously, I remember growing up watching Matlock. Our students probably don't know what Matlock is, but that was like my view of what an attorney does. And what was something you kind of went into it like expecting, and then you've been in the field over 20 years and now you're like, wow, this was way different or not what I expected?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I can say, and remember, I started as a baby attorney, I started litigating, and I was scared to death because I thought, oh my goodness, you see everyone on TV, everyone is so smooth, no one stumbles on their words, no one even pauses or hesitates, and that's how you had to be in the courtroom to win. And I remember during my first trial, now this one I was just observing with my partners who were actually doing all the work, but they brought me along so I could observe. And I remember realizing how maybe choppy or unsmooth the vast majority of attorneys are in speaking and in the courtroom. Now, when you got someone who was very smooth and could speak effectively, it went a long way. And that's why I'm always a very, very strong encourager of learning to speak well publicly. And you don't have to be perfect, but just learn to speak on your feet and learn to field questions because it went such a long way. But I was really surprised at how not everyone was as smooth as I thought they would be on TV.
Interesting. We do have Blake. Did you want to take the question in the chat box?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. Our question is, have you ever been a part of a case that has set a precedent in civil litigation?
That's a great question. And let me think if I have, because precedent is actually a little bit easier to set in certain areas, especially insurance law, than you might think. And that really just requires a judge, and you might even get a little bit of a judge who thinks differently than some others, that one day decides to come down and make a ruling that surprises you. It may not last very long, it may be overturned, but for that point in time, it is actually precedent, and it would be the governing law. There are a couple times in insurance that some insurance litigation matters where we were just whether or not a certain clause in an insurance policy would apply and how that would apply, and those have that application had changed, and so technically that was setting a new precedent. But do I have my name under any U.S. Supreme Court cases or anything, really fun? No, I don't. But I do have some published opinions.
Awesome. I had a follow-up question that a lot of students have been asking for all our presenters, and that is, what do you love about your job, and what do you dislike? Or hate is a strong word, but you're like, I could do without that.
Love about my job is, I think, the relationships that I make. I've always been a relationship-centered person, and with that, not only can I help people at work and in the context of what I do on a daily basis, it also has given me that base knowledge where I think I used to take for granted that maybe I could help people a little bit more, and just, hey, I don't understand this insurance policy, or I don't understand this contract that I just signed to rent this car, or that as a lawyer you tend to look at things a little bit differently. And I did not, it took me a while to realize how valuable of a tool that can be in real life, and in just explaining it to others who maybe, just spinning their wheels and trying to figure something out. I can look at it, and because of the way I've been trained to think, look at it and see, oh, no, that doesn't mean that. It means this, this, and this, and you're okay. And you can do that a little bit easier because that's the schooling and the training that you've received. In terms of what I love, what can be challenging with the career is it can be very time consuming, and it can, just like a lot of careers, it really kind of creeps in to all various stages of your personal life. So if you're not careful, it can take over very quickly, and you have to be very good in setting some boundaries. Now, I say that in when I started at the firm early on, I was I worked really hard. I would work really long hours. I would work late at night, early in the morning. I would work weekends because I knew that's what it took to learn and to grow. And I was willing to do that. As I got older, then I started setting some more boundaries. And as you get more experienced, and saying, okay, well, this is my work time and this is my family time. So I think not just in law, but a lot of careers these days, that is certainly a challenge, because law, there's always a lot of work out there. I could work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for quite some time, and still have, as long as there are human beings, we're always going to have tension and challenges and conflict, and that's what lawyers come in and help to resolve that and solve those problems. So it's something where you just really have to be strong and start setting some boundaries as to, okay, I'll work my 110% here, but this is my family and my off time.
Love it. We have another question.
Okay.
Has your practice or work changed a lot since you started doing it? In what ways? How do you think your organization, firm, practice will change in the next few years?
Okay, so that's a phenomenal question, and I actually almost incorporated something like that into my program and into my presentation. but I thought, well, no one's gonna want to hear about the dinosaur days. But yes, I think it's extremely relevant, because in 2002 when I started, um, you didn't have a BlackBerry. You weren't giving out your cell phone. You didn't even have a laptop. I started going into the office, and I had a desktop computer. I had a landline phone, and I would cringe every time it would ring because I didn't know if I'd be able to. You didn't know who was calling, and I didn't know if I'd be able to answer their question because I was a baby attorney, and I didn't have that confidence yet. But when I was done at the end of the day, and everything was still paper, you didn't have the electronic. When I was done at the end of the day, I was done at the end of the day. So that's why I was at the office so much, because if I wanted to work, I had to be there by my computer. Um, and then as technology changed, we had laptops, and then you had the BlackBerry before the smartphone, and so as that increased, your ability to connect continued to increase, but your ability to disconnect decreased. So you're always on and always available, and that again poses its own. Sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's not so good. But that certainly is the biggest. The technology has changed, so the type of practice. One other thing I will say is when I first started practicing, another attorney, like the opposing counsel's word, they upheld it. And so you had that handshake agreement, and they honored that. Now, if you don't have everything in writing to a T, and not every attorney, but it's one reason why I wanted to start a switch to go in-house instead of working at the firm, is you start that people weren't necessarily honoring what they promised to do as much. So I think kind of the culture has changed a little bit, as well as technology. How do I see it changing moving forward? Well, there's certainly an influx of artificial intelligence coming in, which is starting to, hey, I actually have a coffee mug that says, please do, what does it say? Please do not confuse your Google search with my law degree, because you can find out a lot online these days, in Google, just a plain Google search to see, oh, what's the law, and it can be online can be a very valuable tool. Don't get me wrong, but you have to know how to vet your sources, and is whether or not there's something that's reliable or isn't reliable. So that's something that you had to learn to do. And with the onset of artificial intelligence, and it's still, we're still going to wait to see how that really comes in, and how reliable that can be sometimes, and how that impacts the legal community as a whole.
Thank you. Blake, you want to kind of wrap things up, or if you have any other questions?
Yeah, no, just for those students, given our virtual environment, sometimes it's nice, or students are able to be different places, but then still access these recordings afterwards. So for those students that weren't able to show up today and ask their questions, in the coming days, weeks, months, that our students do get around and watch a recording and have questions, would it be all right with you if Jonathan and I kind of compile a list and maybe send them over to you to get some of those questions asked?
Absolutely, always happy to respond, happy to help in any way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time coming here and sharing your wealth of knowledge with all of us and our students. I know we all appreciate it very much. So thank you so much again, just for your time and sharing everything with us today.
Awesome, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it, and always happy to help.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And for our students watching, still, we have another wonderful speaker getting close to the end. We're in that second half of our fourth annual career fair. So come back soon. We'll look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Thank you again so much, Amanda, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, you all too.